Poisons. Hi, I've got a patient who is on some Chinese herbal remedies.
Dave just collapsed on the floor. He was shaking and making a noise. I thought, as he'd previously had a stroke, that he was having another stroke, so called an ambulance straight away. And
I remember nothing about it at all.
2 weeks ago, 38-year-old David Rickaby suddenly started fitting in front of his family.
My concern when he arrived in hospital was that he'd taken some herbal remedy, which I'd bought the previous day. It just seemed such a coincidence that he should take this herbal remedy one day and have a seizure the next day.
Angela had made her husband a tea from this Chinese herbal remedy, hoping it would treat a skin complaint which hadn't responded to conventional medicine. She'd been sold it without a consultation or medical advice.
I would have just thought that it was completely safe because it's herbs.
Yeah, it's plants, isn't it?
And
natural.
You just thought everything in there would be completely natural.
David Rickaby, please.
Today, the couple have returned to Gloucester Royal Hospital to find out if the tea caused David's fits. But for doctors investigating, finding out if the remedy is to blame won't be easy. Patients like David, who have had strokes, are routinely at risk of developing epilepsy.
I think it's desperately sad. He went for a year with a significantly high risk of having an epileptic attack, and he hadn't had a seizure. And then, sadly, he did. The real question is whether or not the Chinese herbal treatment played any part at all in causing him to have the attack.
It would be nice to know that it was something other than the stroke that had caused it.
Triggered it, yeah.
It would give us more confidence that he wouldn't have another stroke.
The Rickabys are among a growing number of people now turning to alternative remedies. But it's an industry that isn't legally controlled. And, like all medicines, some herbal remedies can be dangerous if misused.
Hello, Poisons. Yes, hello. A 30-year-old female, slim build, weighs about 8 stone, has taken an overdose of approximately 80, that's 80, Quiet Life herbal remedy tablets. And I know she's drowsy and tachycardic. She is? Yeah.
Last year, the National Poisons Information Service received over 1,000 inquiries from doctors worried that herbal remedies may have poisoned their patients. Debbie Shaw investigates many of these cases.
Herbal remedies are usually extracts of whole plants and combinations of plants, and as such contain many different chemicals.
Many herbal remedies work and are safe, but little is known about how the chemicals in them could poison some people. This is the dried bark of Aristolochia. Its use is banned in Britain after herbalists accidentally poisoned patients with this toxic variety of the species.
The biggest outbreak has been in Belgium, where there was a slimming clinic which used this plant by mistake as a slimming treatment. And there they've had 100 women who needed renal dialysis, and about half of those have had kidney transplants.
Chinese herbal remedies are one of the most popular and respected alternative medicines. The industry in the UK is worth over £10 million a year. For 2,000 years, reputable and careful Chinese herbalists like this one have used the power of plants to heal. Some are combined into formulas and boiled to make tea. The Chinese use over 7,000 medicinal plants. And to identify unknown specimens, the unit often turns to the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew.
Hello, Chris.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
How are you?
Good, not bad, thanks.
Well, I've got an interesting new Chinese patent remedy case. Unfortunately, all the paperwork is in Chinese,
Right.
and so we don't know what's in it.
Debbie has bought a sample of the remedy suspected of causing David Rickaby's fits to be examined by Chris Leon, a specialist in identifying Chinese herbs.
We're always a bit worried about trying to resolve some of these patent remedy cases. A product such as this will actually contain many different plants, and a single pill could have as many as 15, possibly 20 different ingredients in. Some of the things around me here are typical Chinese medicines, and the form they normally take might be something like this. This is a single species of an orchid. It's the stem of an orchid that might be one of the ingredients in a remedy such as this. So that presents an enormous challenge to us here at Kew to determine exactly what each of those ingredients are. She's just sorting out some of our...
The identification unit is part funded by a charitable foundation. It also works closely with Chinese specialists in plant chemistry.
Jen, hello. How are you doing?
Yeah.
Debbie's come along with a rather interesting remedy here, and I'm just wondering if you can help us. Does that look at all familiar to you?
Yes, I have seen this.
Oh, good.
This is a formula of Qingdai.
Can you have a look to see if it says anything about possible side effects there?
Some patients maybe eat more food when they take this medicine.
What do they say it's used for?
It's used to reduce body heat and toxic things, and it can...
Debbie recognises most of the herbs, which are often used safely to treat skin complaints. But the leaflet doesn't mention any risk to people who've had a stroke. In Gloucester, doctors are taking a different approach in trying to work out what hospitalised David Rickaby for 5 days.
We've run several tests, including a brain scan, so that we could look at the anatomy of his brain, and an EEG, which is designed to show us the physiology of his brain. That's to say, basically how the brain is working in terms of the electricity in the brain. These will show us if there's any area in the brain that's damaged and any area that could be regarded as significant as a possible source for the fit that he had.
Hello, Poisons Information.
Hello there, I wonder if you can help me. So we're dealing with an incident where somebody has eaten some toxic plant.
Oh, the name of the plant?
Hemlock, apparently.
I mean, hemlock water droplet is extremely poisonous. It can cause convulsions and it can cause cardiac and respiratory arrest.
This is one of the 10,000 calls a year the unit receives about people poisoned by plants native to Britain.
People just think that flowers are there to be cut and put in a vase and admired, or they're there for a food staple, and they don't see them as a being themselves that have evolved on this planet to protect themselves through mechanical means, say spines. Or it could be a chemical that is actually so powerful it will affect humans as well.
Some British flora and fauna are extremely toxic, as Brian and Sheila Reiki discovered last year. They were walking their dogs near their home in Worthing, East Sussex, when they noticed some berries.
Oh, this is the berry here. There's 2 of them. They're green at the moment, but when we picked them, they were black. First time we saw them, I tried one, found it was sweet, and we picked them along with the blackberries.
What the Reikis mistook as bilberries were the fruit of Atropa belladonna, a plant that poisons in a terrifying way. It's considered so dangerous, its more common name is a warning: deadly nightshade. Back home, Sheila froze the berries, and 6 months later made a very special crumble on Valentine's Day. Within an hour of eating the dessert, they knew something was wrong.
I didn't have any pains in the stomach. There was just this irresistible urge that I had to be sick. I couldn't stop being sick. I couldn't stop being sick. It was just pumping out, all this mauve gunge. It was like, I've never been sick like it before. It just really, just pouring out.
Deadly nightshade has two poisons, atropine and scopolamine. Both attack the central nervous system. Once digested, they block a neurotransmitter called acetylcholine. Acetylcholine regulates brain activity and controls our smooth muscles, the special muscles in blood vessels, glands, the eye, and the heart. When acetylcholine is blocked, a person stops sweating and overheats. Their heartbeat becomes irregular, and their brain suffers from sensory overload, causing wild hallucinations and fits that make the person a danger to themselves and others. At its most severe, deadly nightshade will cause coma and even stop the heart completely. Over the next 48 hours, the Rikis were to experience many of these symptoms.
The walls had started to come in on me. So I was like standing here, holding the walls back, calling out for Brian because I can't make out why he's not coming to help me at this point.
Sheila was being sort of sick, but I couldn't seem to bring myself to help her. And I started to do peculiar things in as much as I started jumping up in the air, but as I jumped up in the air, I seemed to be coming off the ground quite a long way. But as I jumped up, I just sort of fell backwards, and I just sort of could hear myself saying, what on earth am I doing? You know, this is stupid, you know, because I was like harming myself, and there's no way that I'd want to harm myself.
Both lost feeling in their legs and were reduced to crawling around the house, desperately trying to stay in control.
The last thing I remember was trying to help Sheila get onto the bed, and I couldn't, and that was about the end of it.
The last thing I remember saying, even though I was on my hands and knees, was shouting out to you, we must call the doctor, because obviously something was terribly wrong.
They didn't make it to the phone. The next day, after neighbours noticed the Rikis hadn't left for work and that their curtains were still drawn, they called the police.
Most of the time you'll either find something like an elderly lady lied on the floor, she's fallen out of bed and couldn't get up, etc. But something like this I've never seen before at all, and hopefully we'll never see again. Completely surreal, very, very weird.
The police arrived at the Rikis' house over 10 hours after they had eaten the crumble.
Looked through the letterbox and I could see a lady knelt down on the floor. It looked like she had congealed blood coming from around her mouth, or some form of dark coloured resin. She started talking and everything was complete gibberish. You couldn't understand what she was saying. My head was shaking, it was like that just all the time, constantly. And then when she'd get wound up, she'd get louder, start screaming, banging walls.
The house was completely vandalised and the front door was locked. Thinking it was a domestic violence case, the police broke in through the back, and it was here that they first encountered Brian.
He was basically naked, running around the house naked, and he was just frantic, completely manic, walking fast from room to room, not knowing what he was doing. It was like he was frantically looking for something, but wasn't. Banging walls, getting louder and louder, more aggressive. It was basically at that point that we thought, we've got to get an ambulance here straight away because something's not right.
Brian had to be restrained and clothed. Then the couple were taken to nearby Worthing General Hospital.
They were in a serious condition. They were rigid, sweating, their reflexes were increased, their pupils were widely dilated and reacted sluggishly to light. Once their condition had stabilised, they were brought straight up to the ITU here.
In intensive care, they were sedated and given oxygen, while doctors took X-rays and blood tests.
The chief concern was to find out what had happened. They clearly were in a confused and toxic state. What had caused it? Had they got an infective cause, an encephalitis, a meningitis, or had they ingested a toxic substance?
Kew Gardens became involved after small seeds were found in Brian's teeth and Sheila's vomit-stained clothes. The remains of the crumble were later discovered in their kitchen, and berry samples were sent to the poisons unit botanist.
The problem with these fruit is that they had been cooked, and this had destroyed a lot of the characteristics that we'd normally use when trying to make an identification. But luckily for us, the seeds were remained inside the fruit, and so we could use these to find some useful characteristics for identification. The key was actually looking at the shape, fairly rounded, almost kidney-shaped. They turned out to be seeds from deadly nightshade, Atropa belladonna.
Deadly nightshade can kill, but its toxicity is reduced if the berries are cooked before they're eaten, as in the case of the Rikis. And by the time everyone knew what had happened to make them so ill, the Rikis had started to recover. But even today, the couple still have occasional nightmares and flashbacks.
It took us a year to get back to our normal selves. We both feel pretty stupid on doing something like this. You know, we've got to the age that we are, and we've gone and picked something and eaten this thing, which has done a great deal of harm, you know, and it could have killed us.
To help doctors identify plants in cases like the Rikis, the unit has compiled a database listing all the toxic plants in Britain. It includes several species that can be confused with edible varieties. Among the most deadly is Conium maculatum, hemlock.
That grows along disturbed ground, so ground that has been dug up for, say, housing developments.
Its leaves have been mistaken for wild parsley and at times even smoked as cannabis.
Conium maculatum causes a specific type of syndrome that causes ascending paralysis. So you sort of die from your feet up.
Another is monkshood or aconite. It's grown in many gardens.
Very small amounts can cause toxicity. Even breaking it apart with your fingers has been seen to cause feelings of pins and needles to the hands, feelings of weakness, headache. So it's even just toxic by absorption via the skin.
The roots of the wild variety of aconite have been wrongly identified as horseradish, yet small amounts of its toxic chemical, aconitum, will kill. With some plants, you don't have to eat them to be poisoned, as Perry Compton discovered after pruning a bush in his garden.
Getting ready for bed, noticed a rash, just a small one at first there. Woke up in the morning, the rash was all down my arm, and I noticed blisters on my hands, and it progressively got worse. And they started off that sort of size, yeah? And that sort of size. They just progressed to that. Should be glad to have them, whatever they're going to do to them.
Today, Perry has come to Bath's Royal United Hospital to see a doctor who specialises in treating cases like his.
Hello, come and sit down, Dr. Lovell.
Right, thank you.
Well, the rash you've got is very typical of a rash you get from certain plants. And what happens is there are substances in the plant sap which produce a toxic reaction when you get sunlight as well as contact with the sap. And it tends to cause a kind of chemical burn in the skin.
The treatment is simple.
Okay, you ready? Okay, going in now. Little leak, as I suggested, as I suck back so it starts to deflate.
The plant that poisoned Perry Compton is common. It's known as rue. Rue contains chemicals called sorrelins, which bind with proteins in the human skin, making the flesh vulnerable to ultraviolet light. Sometimes the blistering is so severe it requires hospitalization. Rue isn't the only plant that has this effect. So too can celery if eaten in large quantities, and the leaves of parsnip.
It's called phytophotodermatitis. So that's dermatitis, skin swelling, that's activated by the sun, and phyto means plant.
But the phototoxic plant that causes the most serious burns is giant hogweed. It grows along the banks of many of Britain's rivers.
The damage it causes is very severe. It can leave people with quite severe discoloration and deep pigmentation to their skin. But it's quite easy to protect yourself from this because it's only activated by UV light. If you are exposed to this plant, simply covering yourself, and then you won't get these effects. It's only in the presence of sunlight that activates this chemical because your skin is sensitized to sun.
After 4 days, Debbie Shaw has found out exactly what was in the herbal tea suspected of causing David Rickaby's fit. But her main concern is how it came to be sold to his wife.
It's supposed to be a very strong formula. According to a Chinese herbalist who did read the list of ingredients, he didn't believe it was the sort of product which was suitable for supply over counter, and especially without any consultation beforehand.
She discovered 3 herbs in the formula with the potential to cause harm. The first is salvia. It increases blood flow in the brain. The second is xanthium. In overdose, it can cause seizures. The third herb is Dryopteris. It's a restricted drug in this country. It shouldn't have been prescribed without a full medical examination. The remedy is not thought to be dangerous if used correctly, but David was a special case.
Considering the sensitivity of the patient, it does look as if there might be a coming together of a number of effects in this particular patient.
Her findings are faxed to Dr. Stevens in Gloucester, who's completed his own investigations.
You were fine until the Saturday. You took 2 doses of this on the Saturday, another one on the Sunday, and then on the Sunday afternoon you had a fit. I think the message is obvious, isn't it? That, this is probably not a very good idea.
Dave Rickaby may never have developed epilepsy following his stroke, but taking this remedy could now have left him vulnerable to further seizures. He'll be prescribed medication to try and control them.
Thanks very much. Okay, I'll see you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
This is the first time that we've had somebody with a problem of this sort taking this type of medication where there is actually something that looks like evidence that it might be bad news. The idea that medication of this sort can be sold casually from shops in the high street or herbal remedies being sold in supermarkets, it does leave one feeling somewhat uncomfortable that this is not quite the way these things should be controlled.
There's no reason for it to happen, was there? No reason at all. Why stay in hospital for 5 days due to taking a herbal tea?